Hey, lunch break. So glad you guys tuned in today. We're so happy you joined us. Like us, share us. What do you usually say, Tiffany? Hit the button.
Make sure you hear those bell notifications and hit subscribe.
Hey, we're not too proud. We're here because you guys watch us. You guys like us. We're here today with Leticia Perez.
Hello.
She's our 5th District Kern County Supervisor.
Yeah.
What you're the chairman of the board? Is that what that is now, or president of the board?
Well, not officially the chair, but pretty much the chair every year. No, I'm kidding. No, Zach Scrivener's our chair. I was chair a couple years ago.
Okay, that's
and
where
I've
I'm
been
coming
chair
from.
before, and it's super fun. But we rotate, so other people get to do the leading of the board, which is cool.
Okay.
Well, I've been there many times. You do a great job,
Thank
Leticia.
you. Thank you.
Got to interact a
I
few
love it.
times, so it's so. Well, there again, I mean, your time is very valuable out there, and we're just glad you stopped by. Take time for lunch
thank
break.
you.
Yep.
Well, I appreciate, time is limited, as we know, right? We're mere vapors.
Yeah.
So the time, how we spend our time matters.
Is important.
And we should think about it and, give it thought because it's limited.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Hey, you got to think about that. So we're glad you joined in with us. I'm here with my wife, lovely wife, Tiffany Touchstone. She's a superintendent at public school out there, and we are there. We're happy to be here. We want to thank MLH Production and Mike Harvey. I can see him. You guys can't, and he produces our show, and he's just great. And we have our tech team. We have Alex, and he's here, and we have Tim, and we have Valerie. Yeah, it's always good to have the young faces there.
Yep. They're the future.
They are. And then Nathaniel Tweed is our director, and we have Christian out there. So Christian is he works for you, and he's out there. He just knows I'm talking about him. We'll get him in here.
Oh yeah, Christian Romo. He's my right hand.
I like it. You got to have that.
Absolutely.
You have
100%.
Faithful, loyal servants of the public.
You know what I think, Leticia, and as I see that, and you've noticed that we have young people and you've got a young man that's very capable, you have to have that. I always tell people it's kind of that Barnabas, Paul, Timothy relationship.
Love that.
Where you got people that are older than you, kind of pouring into you, and you have younger people that you're pulling in because they've got to be there. They got to continue this race on.
Well, if I've had anything to really separate me from so many others I see in the business, and many of them, I mean, it's no put down. I've had the most remarkable mentors from every background and spectrum that you can imagine. And I say it publicly a lot. I've had very, very conservative mentors that really poured into a person that they saw could use some new viewpoints, if you will. And it has changed me and I think made me a more qualitative public servant. So when I think of Christian and the youngsters that we are raising up, frankly, right? Train them up as we have been told, right? And I'm hoping that when he's old, he will not, betray the cause of serving the public, right? With all that you have. And I have every confidence in him, but it does take mentors and it does take succession planning. Right? And we can't be consumed with what we believe is our place here because it's over before we know.
It's a vapor.
Yes.
And I'll tell you what, the older I get, my wife and I talk about that quite often. In the business I'm in, the good business you grew up in, with your dad being in the ministry and doing such an amazing job. And we shared that responsibility on the east side of Bakersfield, with the church. And hearing the wonderful stories about your dad, it's the impacting. So we're glad that you're here. I got one question that we always like to ask, Leticia, and this is anything that you have to think too hard about. But what's something that we all know about you with your public life? What's something that maybe people don't know about Leticia Perez?
Most people do not know that I was actually born in Bible college.
Born at
Bible college. And my parents were attending LABI, Latin American Bible Institute, which was a Latino subset, if you will, of the Assemblies of God. And my mother, having been an Army nurse and having earned the GI Bill, was able to do two things for our family that really changed the trajectory of our future, which was one, she joined the U.S. Army at 18.
I love that.
Right, and became an Army nurse and cared for amputees as they returned from war. And it really solidified an American identity, as you can imagine, because it's so diverse, right, in our armed services. And it just gave her a sense of seeing the world in a way that helped her realize there are real underdogs in the world, real underdogs, right here in front of us right now. So caring for young 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old men returning from war without one or more limbs really solidified for her a sense that the underdog and the fight for the underdog was really the only way to live your life. And she told me that 1,000 times as a kid. But nonetheless, to your original question, the GI Bill allowed my family to get a house for $1 down. Right. And then, of course, you got to pay the mortgage. But you can get a reasonable down payment through your merited service to this great country. And then, of course, the GI Bill funded my parents going to Bible college. So in their second year, I was born. They were married. It was unexpected. And I'll tell you something wild, Tom. My parents were certain that that was the end of their Bible college career because they had no money. They were there on the GI Bill. My father was a custodian at a small school across the street. I mean, they really were living with nothing. And what's funny is my dad, they were so broke that in his little lowrider he had, his root beer brown lowrider, I'm dead serious, instead of a gas cap, he had a potato in there.
No way, Leticia. I've seen that, though.
Okay. Yeah, it's not that original, I guess, but I love the story of the potato in the gas, and he's a janitor, and here they are, they have this child, unexpected child, and while they were married, they could not afford to have a sitter, or they just weren't there. And they approached their professor and told him that they had to leave, and it was this beautiful opportunity, but their priority was going to be their child. And literally, the professor stopped in their tracks, took off his cap, and said, "You're not going anywhere," and literally passed the cap around the room, and everyone in the room put in the little bit they had, and he shared with her a scripture from Galatians. I'm embarrassed to miss the numbers now. I'm a little nervous, but it is, do not grow weary in well-doing.
Yes.
You shall reap a harvest.
Yes.
Galatians 6:9, I believe.
Yes.
You will reap a harvest if you faint not.
Yes.
And what was funny about that is that the gentleman running the class did not like my mother. She was strong and outspoken, and he had actually formed an entire group against my mom called the 12, in which my father was a participant. Okay, my father was a participant.
Oh yeah, I can see Tom doing that.
I love you for saying that.
Well, Leticia,
We'll go back to that another time.
I married a really strong-willed woman.
Oh, I love that.
But that's what I did, and of course I have 2 daughters. And they're very strong-willed women, And
so you appreciate the dynamic.
100%.
But I appreciate that too, because there's 2 things that we told our daughters out there is like, you got to get an education, and you got to apply yourself.
Right.
And
got to work hard.
Work hard.
And to this day, I mean, I've got one in Kansas right now, working, but she lives in Irvine. I got one that lives in Tennessee, and they're hard workers.
Yeah.
It's the key.
And they're very, very strong-willed.
Well, people
and
respect
opinionated.
that. And what was so striking about that moment for my mom, as she told me 100 times, was this was her mortal enemy. This is a guy who just wanted to see her play her role.
Right.
And she was not willing to do that. And, that's a conversation for another time. But
I love that.
But he went around, he said,
Not
you're not
him,
going
but-
anywhere. And he passed his hat around. They collected money, Galatians 6:9. And they said, just the feeling of support, the feeling of love. They said, we can do this. And literally just one day at a time. I ended up spending the first year and a half of my life underneath the seminary desk, listening to the word. I need to listen more, I assure you. But nonetheless, that was the beginning of my life. A lot of people don't know that. But it's La Puente, East LA, while all of my siblings were born at Kern Medical, and my mother and all her siblings were born at Kern Medical, I was born in East LA in Bible college.
You had to be different.
Here we are.
Yeah.
You wanted to be different.
Here we are.
Both my
I like
daughters
that.
Isn't that fun?
both my daughters will claim they were born at the church.
They felt like
felt
it.
that way.
Yeah.
But my youngest, I'll never forget, Leticia. My wife, we were working at this. We had a private school, so we were working at the school at the church, and we were locking the office. And Tiffany told me, she goes, "We need to go to the hospital." She was pregnant with my youngest daughter, and I'm like, "No, we're going. We just got to take my oldest to your mom's house." And he goes, "No, we need to go. She needs to meet us there." And 4 hours later, my youngest was born.
Yep.
So she's the closest that we can claim that.
Tom, now that I know you've been surrounded by women, I realize magic why I like you so much. It makes perfect
Yes,
sense.
we've trained him.
He's been properly trained.
Yes, absolutely.
I've been
fantastic.
indoctrinated, and I've had a male dog and a male cat.
Yeah, and that's about it. Everything.
That's the only
Yeah, them
testosterone in
females.
my house.
Seems like a good balance to me. It
Yeah.
works for
It
me.
is.
Right.
My youngest is getting married, so I do get a son-in-law in
Yeah.
2.5 months.
Oh, my
Danny Jimenez.
goodness.
He is first
Big
generation, graduating from Fresno State. We're really proud of him.
Yeah.
Danny Jimenez and actually
Mechanical.
Jaime,
With,
mechanical engineer.
A mixed family.
Yes,
How-
we
how
do.
we love it.
exciting.
We love
Oh,
That's exciting.
it. You're teaching us how to celebrate.
Really?
Yeah,
What
yeah.
a changing world. My
Yeah.
husband always says, in 100 years, we're all going to look like Keanu Reeves. So let's stop pretending. We're all blending. We're one people. So
Well, they're
let's,
always like, we're Hispanic, Latino. Come join the party,
I
because
love
we're the small white
it.
family that,
I love it. How
We are.
fun.
We are.
So we love it. Yeah.
Congrats
great.
on the pending nuptials.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's a big change.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it is.
But we're excited.
And you have to encourage them in their marriage.
Yes.
They have to see other married people doing it and
Yeah.
staying.
Yes.
Right? Because
Yeah.
it's a challenge.
there again, you have you have a 5-year-old and a 11,
10-year-old.
right?
Yeah, 5 and 11.
Yep. So I mean, you have to allow them to experience things. My wife and I would always told them that the world's hard,
Yes, it is.
and you just got to make it. I mean, I called my daughter when I was coming here. I called Taylor. We were just talking about she had a flat tire the other night.
Middle of Kansas.
In middle of Kansas.
Middle of nowhere.
And
She's at a conference.
And she left her purse in her hotel room. She just went out to get Chick-fil-A
Chipotle.
Chipotle, and she had a flat tire. So she called us, and we're like, okay, mom and dad are on. You never finish raising your kids.
No.
What good parents.
And so we're on the
God
phone
bless
going,
you.
And
okay.
still on my phone's going to die. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is my worst nightmare.
Literally.
Because she left her charger at the hotel.
Yeah.
Today we talked lessons learned. What are they? So it's fun.
goodness.
So you grew up in the church.
I grew up in the church. My father's a minister. We grew up around a bunch of foster kids.
Yes.
And just sort of the essence of giving the way that Christ has actually told us
Yes.
to give.
Community.
frankly.
Yeah.
They think if you're coming around foster kids, you're not forgetting the orphans. That's a commandment. The widows, the orphans, and the poor. That's
right.
Isaiah 58. That's our church's mantra. That's the things that we always do. Pastor Ron says it's got to fit that. Widows,
should.
orphans, and poor. I mean, how are we affecting them? So you were a Highland Scotsman.
Highland Scotsman, graduated in '95, a million moons ago, and
Baby.
but I tell you, I had the best education here in Kern County. I really
Yes.
believe that from good people. I'm on Facebook with my elementary school teacher, Mr. Reichert, who was my 6th grade teacher, best
neat.
teacher. I remember he would line us up, and he would throw out a bunch of mathematical equations, and it would be a whole long line, right? Minus this, plus this, divide this, and we'd all be clamoring for his approval. And if you got the right answer in the end, he'd say sucker. Then you could come back to him afterwards and get however many suckers you earned.
Oh, I love it.
And
Yeah.
he was just Mr. Reichert. I talked to him to this day online. Fabulous teacher, Mr. Queering at Highland High, who was also the teacher of my CAO, Ryan Alsop. Bakersfield's that way.
Yeah, it is.
It is. And I there's
There's
really
like small degrees of separation in this
and
city.
it's really something to be said about going back to your hometown. And if you need to go away and you should come home. I can't believe I'm saying that. I sound like an old person.
well,
but I believe that. I really do.
Well, we had always told our daughters, we'd like you to go away to college if you want to, and you feel that that's the right spot you are, and they both did. They both never came home though. They just come home
might.
they come home for holidays, but they went out to spread their wings, and that's what we always raised them to do, and I love it that you came back to serve our community. But you went to UC.
So right out of
Santa
high
Barbara.
school, I went to UC Santa Barbara, and I was there at the university 5.5 years. I'm not proud of that, but I was a live-in nanny. Okay, I had a lot of work.
Really?
Yes, I was a live-in nanny, and I'll tell you something interesting. It was my first kind of foray into behind the veil of another culture and another way of living, and I was totally, utterly stunned to find out that some people call before they come to your house. I could not believe it. This is a conservative, well-off family.
Yeah.
They operated 180 degrees different than my family did.
Yes.
And it was stunning. It was so wonderful to see another way of living, a different way of living, and to learn some of the norms, frankly, and some of the rules of etiquette and otherwise that people from my world often don't know. So it was kind of a soft skills education, if I'm being totally honest.
Our youngest daughter was a nanny.
She was a nanny for a while. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, really? really?
She went to school in Thousand Oaks.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so, yeah, she was just right down the corner from where you went to
Oh,
school.
I'll tell you. So I was a live-in nanny 2 years in college, most marvelous family. And I was nannied this young girl who was 11 turning 12 when I moved in. Both parents worked out of state.
Wow.
Okay. And
They
were,
trusted you.
oh, big time. Thank you for saying that. And I just
Was
praise
that
him
pressure?
on
Because
that.
our daughter felt pressure. She was driving around 2 kids, and she'd call us, and she'd go, how do I do this?
Well, yeah, she just was like, this is a lot of responsibility when you really think about it.
It is,
you know?
and I think both of them were gone. And she worked in Colorado, he worked in Texas. They were both very successful, very devoted to their careers. But when they were home, it was all about Chrissy, and they were completely devoted to her well-being. I'll tell you, it informs a lot of my opinions about how I can do what I'm set on a path to do.
Yes.
Right. I just need to focus a little more like they did on when you're home, you're 100% home.
Right.
Because
right.
they really had that down.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's harder
good.
for me. I'm working on it. But I did see it. And that's a family who to this day is absolutely close, beloved. They're amazing people. And I'll tell you this, when I did my undergraduate work in Santa Barbara. Then I went to law school in the Midwest, Northwest Indiana, which was a lot like the Central Valley. And when I came back, I had to prepare for the bar. Well, Bakersfield at the time did not have a real bar prep course. So I had to go back to Santa Barbara. They took me back in, fed me, housed
a
me,
great
clothed me,
Relationship.
the whole nine, to give me 60 days of 10 hours a day, so 600 hours of preparation. Chrissy was at Harvard getting an MBA, so they
Wow.
didn't need me. They still took me back in, housed me, fed me, made it possible for me to drive to San Diego, take the bar, pass it first shot. Thank
Right
God.
on.
And here we are. So, it really was, Tom, sort of an introduction into another world of people that I thought I knew
Right.
things about or
Right.
understood really even the motivations or even paradigm of the world. It was such an education, and it started me on another path.
Leticia, would you say this? Because I think in my business with a church, you have to get to know people. And not everybody thinks like we do. And it's great to understand that. My wife's in education. She sees that, and you're in politics, and you see that. It's good to be introduced to that. It's good to be able to say, I'm going to bring it home. When I do funerals, I always tell people that are in attendance, I say, those of us that are still have breath in our body, what we're hearing today, you can put into action. We can learn from other people. The Bible even says in Ecclesiastes 7:2, it's better to be at a funeral than be at a celebration, because you're going to learn something.
That's what you're learning.
And
That's
so-
where your heart is open, right? It's tender, and you're in a vulnerable position to say, what should I learn now?
Yes.
Right? Because as my cousin always said when we were younger, the greater the radius of your knowledge, the greater the circumference of your ignorance. Right? So, we really should be humble when we think about what we know vis-a-vis what we need to learn.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
I just discover all the time how little I know and how much I'm dependent on others to help me get it right.
Oh, gosh, you hit that on the head. I feel in my new position, I'm around these, mainly doctorates, and
They know everything.
Yeah, they do. But I'm learning like how little I knew or thought I knew. I'm like, oh my goodness, there's so much to learn, and I love the challenge. So good.
My wife being out in
Yeah, I
a
love it.
school district that's more social economically challenged.
Yeah, we're-
she'll come home if she could bring home every student
Yeah, I would.
that she wants to bring home. It just is. She'd come home and
So much need.
and we talk about that, but it's good that you let that infect your life. So you can feel that. I mean, that's when I in ministry, I get to be around people and I see the stuff they're going through, and I'll bring it home and I'll share with Tiffany just a little bit of what I go through. It's just kind of a neat thing. So you went to UC Santa Barbara. Before the show came on, you talked about how your faith affected your life at college.
Well, when I was at UC Santa Barbara, by the grace of God, I was very involved early on with Campus Crusade for
Yes,
Christ. So I led a Bible study for Campus Crusade. I know most people would be stunned to
Why would
know
they be
that.
stunned that?
Because you don't think of Democrats, right, as being people of faith or in a traditional sense, right?
Well,
You
I
don't-
do because I know you.
That's very gracious. I thought about saying that one earlier when you asked me, what do people not know? But it really was a marvelous community to be part of and to have an alternative community to what is sort of the craziness of college, right? in UC Santa Barbara, a pretty wild place. And I'll tell you, without getting into too much detail, I really, because of my involvement with Campus Crusade for Christ, I didn't drink in undergrad, and I didn't have boyfriends. So I'll leave it at that and just say I stayed on very, very square, and I really think it just kept me from losing myself.
Right.
It gave me a community of people that were struggling with the same things, frankly, right, and still trying to be somewhat cool and not a complete nerd or an outsider, but still a community of people that we're in the same place. And I'm really grateful for that because they really gave me love in a place I really needed it.
Right.
Did your mom and dad still try to help direct you? Because I know when my daughter, oldest, went to college, Pastor Ron and I were trying to tell her, go to this church. She goes, Dad, I can figure this out.
Yeah.
And it was the first time that I knew that was my first
Time to back away.
dad step back. and she did. I mean, both my daughters found places to worship and, friends to be around. But as a parent, you almost need that pushback. And like, oh, okay. And I tell them nowadays that I'm more of a coach in their life than I am anything else.
I do not look forward to the day when my kids have more freedom than I'm comfortable with. Really, I don't know how to even begin to think about it.
It's a tough phase.
I
think
want to
so
think
far
about
it's the hardest phase.
Well, people ask me all the time.
Sorry to tell you that.
Man,
but God gives a lot of grace, and He'll guide you doing that. But sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh.
Can you please come home?
Well,
I'll take care of you forever.
Yeah, exactly.
The movie Father the Bride, when the girl's telling Steve,
my dad, I love that.
He's like, Daddy, I'm getting married.
When she's in the pigtails, she's like, you still see me as a 7-year-old pigtails. He's like, I do not see you that way. It's absolutely how he sees her, and it's beautiful.
When my daughters would call and tell us they were driving down the Grapevine, that's why I saw it. Them standing by.
Yeah.
Well, trucks passing.
We're like, let's let them be okay.
Well, to this,
that's so
to this day, when they go home, we don't sleep. We just go and we track them, of course. And when they get home, we're like,
we have to stay busy until they get home. Yeah.
Keep your mind occupied.
You're always a parent. It never goes away.
It never goes away.
That's really sweet.
So.
I love that your parents infected your life with their belief, their personalities, because kids read that stuff.
Absolutely.
I love the fact that your mom was a nurse. And
that's really cool.
That is really cool. I mean, and how much I'm part of a nonprofit, and we help first responders, called 911 at Ease, and we help the first responders, and so it includes wounded warriors. And when you see the help that they get and how much it helps them, they always have this great connection with their nurses, with their caregivers,
PTs, and
it just it's really special.
In DC they've got many memorials right on the Capitol grounds, and one of them is the Vietnam Memorial.
Yeah.
And they have this beautiful section which incorporates the nurses, right? So there's a built component, but also like on the wall, the nurses that are sort of the unsung heroes there. My kid sister, who graduated from UCLA, followed in my mother's footsteps, joined the Army, and at the same base my mother cared for military personnel. 42 years before my sister was there, Fort Benning, Georgia. My mother left 4 decades later. My baby sister arrived and did the same thing my mother, in the same spirit, in the same vein, right, of service and in medical care of military personnel. My baby sister followed in her footsteps. You're talking about the influence, right, of parents and what you do and how it impacts your children. It does, everything you do impacts them, right? They're watching an example, and who knows what choices they'll make. We all need grace, obviously. But my baby sister followed in my mother's footsteps at Fort Benning, Georgia, 42 years after my mother took step off. My kid sister stepped on.
Isn't that amazing?
How it
You pick up the mantle.
Huh?
Yes, it is
good stuff.
It is.
Well, it is, and you know what? This is what I've always told my wife. Sometimes when you see people that have maybe, toward the world standards, got it together, you really need to talk to their parents. Because there was a lot that happened there. I've always told my wife, when we'll see something on the TV, I go, I love to talk to their parents, because your parents, getting it together, thinking they're going to have to leave, and there's a guy that has a heart for them, maybe he
Convicted. I bet he was
Yes.
convicted.
Right? And we all know how that happens, right,
Yep.
Leticia?
Yes, we
I mean,
do.
my wife, when we get in a little marital spat, which isn't often. No, I'm teasing.
It's not her fault, I could tell. Whatever it is.
What's funny is she will not even argue with me. She'll walk away, and I'm like, "Oh, don't go pray about this, because God."
No,
will
we're
affect
gonna fight it out.
Yep.
I tell this story sometimes because my wife and I, and it was my fault. We were at a marriage retreat and we were speaking. We were opening up the conference, and we got in a fight in front of 600 people, and they just disappeared, and it was my fault. And my wife was so gracious, and she handled it. Those 600 people just disappeared. It was just her and I. And I admit
In his mind, they disappeared. They were still sitting there, but
They were watching every moment.
Yeah, they were, and I wouldn't say that was a fight. That was just a disagreement. But yeah, he said I messed something up on the display we were doing, and I'm like, no, I didn't.
she didn't.
That's great. Smart man.
But those are the fun stories that you have. So continue on. How has your faith followed you or led you in what you do?
Thank you for that. I tell people all the time because, I'm such a proponent of, defender of, supporter of the First Amendment.
Yes.
Which says to Americans, you can associate how you choose, you can speak how you choose, you can worship if you want, you don't have to either, right? So that's tricky stuff, right?
It is.
Right.
And you never want to impose your beliefs on people because it doesn't work.
Yes. No,
Nobody
it does
likes
not work.
imposition, right? And really, what you do with your life is what demonstrates what you believe, right? That's really the only way.
Yep.
But I do like to tell people, just for some clarity, not that I ever would impose it. And I told the Washington Post this recently, everybody has their heroes. Everybody has a right to have their own heroes. Jesus is my hero.
Yeah, I love that.
If I'm being honest, he's my hero because I look at the way in which he lived his life, the way in which he treated people, in particular the poor, the sex trafficked, women that don't have men protecting them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, children, orphans. The list goes on and on. And I look at that and go, that's really remarkable, right? That's really remarkable. I don't know that a lot of Christians behave the same way. I think we have a lot of room to do there, right? But or room to grow. But he's my hero, my superhero, and that's okay if he's not yours or anybody else's.
I agree.
It's mine, and
you're right, too.
everybody can
Yes.
have their own.
Yes.
But I just don't know how you get it any better than him.
It's my wife and I.
I say that with all due humility.
My wife and I talk a lot about it because in her profession, she was used to it. I know when she went from the private to the public, she was used to praying with kids in school. But as she's went out into the public arena, she's let her faith be shown in action.
Yeah,
and
they will watch you.
And so she's got some cool stories that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even parents, they'll say, "You're a Christian, huh?" And I, yes, and they're like, we knew it, we could tell there was something different, and so it's neat. You just have to
You can't
live it out and do it. You don't need to say a word. I think that speaks louder than.
Well, my dad would always say to us as young people, we fostered a bunch of children and we took in a lot of kids from the community, just hard stuff, right? People, hurting people. And it was always felt like too much, frankly. When I left at 18, I said, thanks, but no thanks. You'll never see me again, right? Wild horses are going to drag me back to this drama. But he would always say, and I just can't help but come back to it, that he would say, the world will know us by our love.
Yes. And that was
And
your
it's frankly
hero.
the only way.
Yes.
That the world will know anything. And if that's your thing, it doesn't have to be your thing, okay? I'm not trying to impose that. I want to be real clear about that. But if it's your thing, you better do it with love. Because it's actually the only way the world is going to distinguish it from, the trash that's out there.
What's
It's
this?
it's a mess.
Leticia, what's
a
that
mess.
saying? No one cares what you know until they know how much you care. And once they know how much you care, they open their life to you. And then you can get in and you can minister to them. And I see that so much with young kids.
So one of the ways in which I see it play out practically today is while there are many mysteries of the universe I don't pretend to know. I'm not a theologian. Don't ask me questions. I don't know. Okay. I know very little, but I do believe that God brings people into my life.
Amen.
For whatever reason. And they're usually
Seasons.
suffering people. They're usually hurting people. Sometimes they're young people, they're kids. I've had a girls' choir at my dad's church for many years. I've had Sunday school classes that I teach. And every once in a while, somebody's brought into my life that for no other great explanation, except that I have resources and ability and power to influence their life. And I can't say no. I can't help but not engage and say, for whatever reason, likely I'll never understand. And I don't need to.
Right.
I don't need to. Nobody needs to explain it to me. But for whatever reason, at this moment in time, this person is here and they need love. And it's all that I can do, right, is to say, let me love in this circumstance. And I feel like that's oriented from, watching my parents actually love, profess faith, but actually show it and do it. And, I get it wrong a lot of times. I'm nowhere near, as impactful as they are. It's just the truth. I have different impacts, right? And that's okay. But their whole lives were about the transformation and love of the most unlovable people. Now, I couldn't do that. I'm too cynical for that. But nonetheless, when that happens, to me, I go, I don't have a choice here. Yeah. I don't get to say no. I get to do what I've been instructed to do, which is love.
Well, Leticia, and this is something, because I talked you off before the show, that I think is really cool that Tommy's legacy is now occupying your dad's church. So everything your dad did is still moving on through a men's and women's home, and now they're having church services back at that building. And so I think, my wife always said this. She's always said when people ask her, what do teachers do? She goes, we make a difference. And I think that's all we can do, is try to make a difference in other people's lives. And that is going to come how we help them, how we encourage them. And that's what I see in Jesus, because, basically it says, don't let any unkind words come out of your mouth, and how that even can uplift somebody's spirit. And so when your parents are taking in foster kids and that, how can you not help but pass that down? I know my wife will come home and she'll say, hey, we're going to buy a jacket for so-and-so in my classroom. And I'll go, absolutely. Just because, it was, she saw somebody with a need. And, and Jesus says, if, you have something, you can make a difference in somebody's life.
That's exactly right. My father would always say, and my mother would say, to whoever is given much, much is expected.
Yes.
And those are even kind of universal principles,
They are.
right? That I think that we see present in many faiths and many ideas about how to make the world a better place. For us, right, we have a very clear cultural and faith lens of which we go, okay, well, here's my hero, and here's how I'm going to try to figure it out for the every years I have here. But I think the alleviation of suffering to people when suffering has been brought before you, without having to solve the world's problems.
Right.
I'm not going to solve world hunger. I'm not going to take a fully traumatized person who has had the most god-awful experiences, but by not my fault or not your fault, but for whatever reason. Right? Do I have the ability to alleviate suffering for this person as a mandate? As a requirement of the tools, resources, and power I've been given, what am I supposed to do when this suffering has been presented to me? What am I supposed to do? I mean, really, by the world standards or by no standards, you could talk your way out of that. And you hear it all the time. Yep. You hear it from Christians, frankly. It's not pretend.
I agree.
Not my problem. Right. Get a job or whatever, Right. And I mean to say, how you ask me how my faith guides me. I try very hard in those moments, and I fail a lot, I promise. But to just go, can I alleviate suffering here without having to understand the causes, the mysteries, what's going to happen in 10 years? Or I don't need to do that. I've been presented with a situation that requires the alleviation of suffering and love. And am I going to do it or not? I try very hard to do it every time.
I see it, with how the pandemic's affected kids, today. All I can do
horrible.
is, you know what? I'm not a social worker. I'm not a psychologist. But you know what? I have one that I can connect you with. And let's get you the help you need, And so sometimes it's just being that connection for people too.
And it's
and
love.
then I'm over praying, but I know
it's
that
love. It's the only
just
way.
loving them, hearing them, listening to them.
As the audience is out there, we're talking, I think we all run into cynical people, because I run into my business and they said, really, Tommy, you're making a difference. because you can't solve all the problems. And I always take them back to the story of a little girl on the beach when the starfish come up on the shore, and she's throwing them back in. And there's a man there that says, of course it's a hypothetical story, there's a man there that says, do you think you're making a difference? She goes, yes, for this one. And this one,
Better believe it.
and this one. I mean,
believe
you
it.
know, you can't do everything, but you
better
can make a
believe it.
difference for the one that's right
in front of you.
And here's the reality that I've seen. I grew up with so much love. I grew up with so much care, and just I grew up with the hope and faith of parents that were real believers.
Yes.
Who said, if we get it right with you, we can change the world. I mean, I authentically believed that, okay?
Yeah.
And I think still do. My mother's gone, but my father here all the time is, for such a time as this. I get that call once a week, I promise you, okay?
I love that. I love that the dad's still there.
Oh, you better believe it, right? And anytime I come to him and go, Dad, you know, there's this really tough racial issue or political issue where I want to go to blows.
Yeah.
And every time he just goes back to the word.
Oh, I love that,
every
Leticia.
time. It's striking. I don't know how he does it, but God bless him. You know, but
He's blessed a lot of people, Leticia. I'll tell you that. I hear stuff all the time.
he's a good man,
Yeah.
and really simply showed us as young people just to love others, and I think that's actually really hard to do if we're being honest. It's hard because people, in particular, the people that Christ spent his time with, okay, they were traumatized people. They were society's rejects, right? And he took the powerful on, and said, "You have it all wrong. You have it all wrong."
There's a story.
And I like that.
I
dig that.
There's a
I'm
story.
always for the underdog.
Well,
always.
my wife
Love
and
it.
I always that. I always talk about the
Especially in sports.
yes, the woman that is brought to Jesus that was caught in adultery. I'm always thinking, where's the dude? You know.
Oh yeah, of course.
And so as she's there, Jesus.
They
didn't-
usually get a pass.
Jesus
Yeah, they
didn't
do.
avoid that. All he said is, say, hey, if you don't have any issues and you have no sin in your life, you guys throw the first stones. And so he handled it in a way that just turned it back on him. And I love that's what Jesus does. I mean, you don't have to, like you say, have the answers. You can say, well, supposedly you do, and maybe you should handle it. And I think as Jesus did that, she got to the point where it was just her and him. And he said, I don't condemn you either. Just go off and don't blow it anymore.
Well, and the key, right, that's repentance, which is a real thing,
Yes,
right?
it is.
But also the humility by which we're commanded to think about the world
Yeah.
for whatever resources and tools and talents and good looks or whatever we get for the 5 minutes we're here, okay? Right? What did Christ tell us about it, right? That you make yourself nothing. And if we're serious about that, which is very hard to do, but if you can even do it for 10 minutes, you're going to look at the world as a place needing love
Yes.
and needing light. It's the truth. You don't have to impose that or judge or just, be a jerk about it. If you're love and you're light, okay, like moth, the world will come to you. But, we've twisted the message, and I think that's unfortunate.
I always get back to that too when people come up and what was that thing when the people challenge Jesus says, what's the commandment? He goes, love the Lord with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love others
As yourself,
as yourself.
and even before yourself,
Right.
before yourself, which is an incredible idea.
Well, I mean, there again, it's like you said, sometimes impossible. And and when you're presented with those, you just do the best you can, and sometimes it feels overwhelming.
Yes, it does.
And so but you do what you can.
Well, the people that, if you look at where Christ spent his time, the people were difficult people. I mean, do you think a prostitute at the well is a person that's just going to go home afterwards and get right back to sweeping
Right.
the floor and life is great? No, these are hurting people. These are hurting, broken people that society has not been kind to. And so that's its own mission field. That's hard. That's really hard. And but it really is God's work.
Yes.
And if you profess to be a follower of Christ, and if you don't, that's okay. But if you do, that's where the work is.
It is.
Yes.
It is.
That's where it is.
Yes.
And that's where it's always left off, because people will. I had one of our young pastors, Josh Vietti, tell me one time, Tom, no one will get mad at you for loving them too much. And I was like, they won't.
I saw a great one, I think, by Mother Teresa recently, where she said, if you judge people, you have no room to love them. Pick one. If you judge, nobody wants you around. If you love them, I mean, that's really the source of light.
It is.
Yes.
Is love. And I am so amazed by my mother and father. They raised all these foster kids. They raised the children of the ministry, right? And with always the attitude that we love people, not things.
Yes.
What we're accumulating is people. These are their words. Souls, not things.
Human equity.
They really believed that.
Yeah. Human equity.
And the impact of that over generations is immeasurable, so profound, and so beyond these piddly time we get here.
Yes.
Yeah.
When we think we're something great.
You know, it's always
We're not, by the way.
Right.
It's always amazing to Tiffany and I when somebody that comes back to us that's young and says, thank you for this or that. And it's hard to remember it, but you did it, you know?
Yeah.
It's so incredible.
And it's a humbling moment. Tiffany will come back and go, I ran
is
into an old
humbling.
student that said, thank you for this. And people, I'm like, it really is, because you may not remember it, but you were in that moment at one point in time and you did do the right
Yes.
thing.
Yes.
Yeah. So Tiffany will come to me. I mean, she came out of the gym one time and ran into Mike Harvey's sister, and she said, hey, thank you.
For encouraging her to go to college.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm all.
Can you imagine some
did?
people? I'll tell you, I was a public defender for several years, and talk about, frankly, a pitiful group of people, okay? And the number one question I was ever asked as a public defender about I was there as a lawyer handling a criminal matter, right? And in a confidential setting, thousands of cases, number one question I was ever asked by a client had nothing to do with the case. And I mean, by 10 to 1, it was always, Tom, Miss Perez, can you help me get a job? With just a kind of pitiful desperation that it really caused me to flee that institution and go, we've really gotten this really wrong, right? Not to take away individual responsibility. Okay, we all have to answer up for what we do. We know this. But that so many people would desire and seek legitimacy and desire to see and seek acceptance. You know, I think that's something, you know, we should pay attention to and go, if you profess to be anything like Christ, of which very few of us are, right? That's still something worth striving towards. Then we should look at that very seriously and go, you know, this world is full of hurting people. Let's be honest. And some get more lucky than others, and some are knuckleheads and whatever, right? But, you know, we don't have the authority to judge anybody, Tom. We don't. And the word is very clear about that. And if you're led by love, then, you know, we would be operating differently.
What does it say if you point one finger, you have three pointing back at you?
At least.
and I'm a disciplinarian and expect a lot, but I do believe in the restorative justice practice, you know, at school, because the old way wasn't working. Like, we're just going to discipline you because, you know, let's restore this so we can get you on the right path to make good decisions.
Absolutely. You know, I think, you know, love will take a person all the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's why we hear about it. It's the word we heard more in the New Testament than any other word. Is very simply love. Love of ourselves, forgiveness of ourselves, grace to ourselves for being simply and utterly miserably human, right? And self-serving and all those things, right? Let's see our name.
It's called a sin nature.
We're mere mortals. So, you know, if we're honest about our own frailties, then we really have no room to judge anybody. And it's really if you really look at the word, outside of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, my dad always says, they were sad, you see. That's an old
I've never
one.
heard that. I love that one.
That's an old, that's not original to my
That's a
dad.
PK right there.
That's a PK right all the way. And you know, there's no life in that.
Yeah.
The life, when I came here, I was just so impressed to see young people full of life. And, you know, you don't see a lot of young people seeking faith, frankly, nowadays, right? I mean, young people are very lost, and they don't have the mentors a lot don't have mentors like you. But to see is an atmosphere where young people can, you know, feel community and feel love and feel acceptance. You know, that's how we grew up. We grew up with constant
Community.
Well, you know, my parents were fanatical, so it was Wednesday night service, Friday night service, twice on Sunday, Tuesdays choir, Thursday is Bible study. I mean, it was literally every day but Saturday. And Saturdays we put on a yard sale or did a you know, car wash to raise money for the men's home or whatever.
Yeah. Always
we were
serving.
slave labor, let me tell you.
Free stuff.
But it was fun.
But
it was
fun.
fun.
It made you who you are today, and I think that's your story.
Thank you so much.
you.
Tiffany, thank you.
Yep,
Thank you
absolutely.
guys
My
for
pleasure.
tuning in. Have a great day or afternoon
Love.
or evening. God bless.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.